Brenda, thank you for coming on Drunkish. I'm so happy. As I told you before I hit record, I pre-chose you. I was like, let me just ask like dream guests, and you are one of them.
Oh, yay. That is like such a huge compliment. Thank you. Thank you. Because you have been on my radar and yeah, I think a lot of you. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, I was so flattered when you said you knew who I was. But in my mind, so you wrote a book called Diary of an Alcoholic Housewife. And to my recollection, I mean, this was Well, no, this was after I got sober, which is why I would have known about that book because I got sober in '09. That book came out in 2011, and I
Mhm.
remember being like, "Oh my God, that's like my story." And I it was such a page turner, and I remember also thinking, well, because not to do all the talking, but because I also came out as sober publicly shortly after I got sober. It was an accident. It's a long story. But so I was being public. So I felt for anybody writing a book like that because I know the judgment, especially that moms face in talking about being sober. For some reason, it's like way worse when you talk
Yeah,
about, yeah.
yeah. There's like this standard, and I felt it from the outside, I felt it from the inside that I had to be like the perfect mom, you know? And I was just petrified when I got sober that people would find out because it's like this weird paradox where, if you're still drinking alcoholically, you're fine. But the minute you quit, you're sick. You know?
Yes.
Um, yeah, yeah. Like nobody, and I was really good at putting a good face on my drinking. I dressed it up in the right glasses and, good booze. And a lot of it was to convince myself that I didn't have a problem. But I also wanted to look good on the outside and not have anybody else think I had a problem. And I did a good job. Um, I sit in meetings where it's like, yeah, everybody knew I was fooling myself, but people really didn't know that I was a drunk. And my drinking friends, like I had separate drinking buddies, I had like my daytime friends and the mommy, and some of that was overlap, but the people that I was drinking around were drinking just like me because you seek out people who can keep up with you, and they weren't pointing any fingers because they were drinking right alongside me. So yeah, I was petrified when I got sober that somebody would find out. And and I kept on trying. I had to, for the first year that I got sober, I was going back and forth all the time, convincing myself that I was an alcoholic and that I needed to quit drinking. Because I hadn't had all these horrible things happen to me that I was hearing happen to other people. Like, my bottom was relatively high compared to a lot of people when they quit. Like, they don't have any friends left. People have written them off. They're homeless. They don't have a driver's license. And I was still, you know, holding it together on the outside, but, a complete wreck on the inside. And yeah, so I started going to meetings in a town that was not my own because I was afraid that somebody was going to be like, oh, Brenda, but it's like, well, if they were sitting in that room, they were in the same space. I finally, out of laziness too, and because it was so much easier to just go down the road, I started going in my own town. But yeah, I was very afraid that somebody would find out. And part of that too was I wasn't sure I was going to stick with it. And I didn't want that kind of judgment. Whereas, like, oh, she's an alcoholic and she was going to AA and look at she's drinking again and, ooh, and then, being under the microscope and, you know, her poor kids or you got a drunk mom and, all that. So, Yeah. So when my book came up, because I started keeping a journal of my first year. I chronicled my first year getting sober because I'd gone to a number of recovery meetings. And like I said, I had to keep on like convincing myself, like, yeah, you belong here. But I went to this one recovery, and it's in my book. And I left there and I was like, shit, I wanted to drink. I didn't want to hang out with those people. I didn't want to be one of those people. I went to a Barnes and Noble trying to find a book that I could relate to that wasn't like, oh, I'm living in a crack house now and no one likes me. And there wasn't. So I started keeping a journal, and a lot I attribute to maintaining my sobriety had to do with this idea that came to me when I was laying in bed after that meeting where I wanted to drink, like write that book, write that book. Because I'm a journalist and I had worked as a journalist for years. And so I started chronicling what it was like to be, a woman that nobody knew really had a problem and looking on the outside, and what to do with your friends and your family and your social circle now that you're not drinking anymore. And I had tried for quite some time, for years off and on. I knew I was really uncomfortable with the amount that I was drinking and with the regularity that I was drinking. So for a number of years, I tried to quit on my own and couldn't. So I started going to recovery meetings, and
So
I
can you
don't know
just
how
tell
they
me,
work, but
yeah, can you tell me
they
like
do.
what was your drinking like? Like, did it start really young?
So I
When did
started,
you start to wonder if you had a problem? Was it after you had kids?
yeah, yeah. It was. So I had a fundamentalist religious upbringing that was very repressive.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah. And so when I was in high school, the wheels kind of came off my junior year of high school. I started drinking and drugging, and, mainly like pot and alcohol with a little cocaine here and there,
Of course.
and Quaaludes too. It was in the day of
Oh,
Quaaludes.
I missed Quaaludes. I feel like I would have really taken to them.
Oh man, they were great. They were like drinking a bottle of wine in one pill.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, a little acid here and there. Yeah, the wheels just came off.
A little meth just for cleaning.
Yeah. That was before my time.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so uh yeah, I was just a party girl, and I partied. I was competitive about my partying. Like I wanted to do the biggest bongs, and I wanted to, drink you under the table, and it was just kind of, I don't know. So, I had this like uber religious mother and this not uber religious dad who was a party guy and the fun guy. So it's like, who do I want to be, like that or that? And my dad, while he was alive, was one of my favorite people to drink with, and he kind of taught me how to drink. And, I remember, one time we were sitting in a bar at happy hour, and he's like filling me a plate with like hors d'oeuvres because it used to be, they'd have these happy hours with all this food too. And he's like, if you're gonna drink, you gotta eat. You gotta lay down a foundation, Brenda. It's those skinny drunks who don't eat that die. Yeah, yeah.
First of
And
all,
then,
those buffets, those happy hour buffets are how I got through my 20s, going to the bar,
yeah,
getting $2 beers and being able to eat a bunch of chicken wings. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
how I fed
yeah.
myself during part of my 20s for sure. He wasn't
It
all
worked.
wrong.
No, you were laying down a foundation.
Right. But how old were you?
You-
Were you even legal at that point, or were you like a teenager?
ooh. I was just under legal at that point because
Okay.
I had taken a year off of college. I'd gone to college my freshman and sophomore year and still couldn't decide what I wanted to do with my life. So I took a year off, and my dad owned a printing company. So I worked for my dad for a year, thinking like, oh, well, maybe I want to take over your printing company at some point. And it turned out I didn't want to do that, but I worked for him for a year, and we would, yeah, his reward after work is, we stopped off at this bar called Bones on the way home, and we would, just scarf up their little buffet table and have cocktails, and so I was like keeping up with my dad, which was a hard thing to do because he had, a wooden leg, he just, yeah. Anyway, so I don't know. I think part of that too was like being able to hold your liquor was a badge of honor with my dad, and I really admired him and I loved him, and um, he was just such a huge good influence and bad influence in my life. Um, he was a beautiful man. He really was. And because he loved me for who I was. He saw me for exactly who I was and loved every little piece of me. Whereas, I always felt like my mom was trying to make me something I wasn't, and
Hmm.
not happy with who she had in front of her because I
Right.
wasn't like the perfect Seventh-day Adventist girl.
So did you go back to college after realizing printing wasn't for you?
I did. I did. And I got a journalism degree and I started working as a journalist. And then, the whole writer thing and oh, we party hard and,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So,
Did you read
oh,
Drinking a Love Story?
I did.
Yeah, she that
Yeah.
it reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Carolyn Knapp was also a journalist and magazine
Hmm.
writer, whatever, and then they would go across the street to the bar and drink
Yeah.
like sort of like off-duty cops.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of like, that's what you did. That was part of your, part of who you were. And you were cool and cynical and, snarky and, getting loaded all the time with your buddies and writing and, yeah, part of the creative process. And yeah. So I bought into that whole um, philosophy about what it is to be a journalist. And I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't fun. It wasn't not fun. It was fun,
I was gonna say
you know?
I'm glorifying it in my mind right now. I'm like, God, yeah, that was because I was a comedian, so that's what we did.
Yeah.
Do your set and then go have drinks at the bar. But did you ever feel, I'm sure you did, like your drinking was still a little bit different than other people's drinking? Mine was just so unpredictable that it was like, how come all these other comics they get they get a little drunk, but I don't notice, like, why do I always end up so drunk that I've either blacked out, can't remember like where I
Hmm.
parked, or have just a horrendous hangover? Like, what's wrong with me?
Oh, absolutely. So we had a Christmas party for the newspaper. And after work on Christmas Eve, we all went out to this bar, and I ended up being hauled out of there by one of my girlfriends, who was an editor on one of the papers that this newspaper chain that we all worked out of the same office. I got so loaded that I grabbed a candle. I smoked back then. I grabbed one of those candles on the table, and I had hair like this too, and dragged it through my hair to light the cigarette, and my hair went up. And so she comes over
Oh my
and she's
God.
like tamping it out, and she's like, "We gotta go." And it was in a suburb that her parents lived in. So she drove me to her parents' house and put me to bed at her parents' house. And I woke up the next morning and went to work, and everybody's staring at me because they were expecting me to be bald. But, I had my good face on, even though I was wearing the same clothes I wore yesterday. And pulled myself together, and here I am. Everything's fine.
Just with
Yeah.
a slight bob. Did you have to,
She got it out pretty fast.
okay,
So
okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you could kind of disguise all the singeing and like pull out the burnt parts and
Right, right, right. So you're saying there was a lot of drinking going on before you started thinking it was a problem.
yeah. But I was not drinking every day.
Right.
It was more of like, social situations, weekends, that type of thing. And
Same.
then when I became a parent with, my first when my first child was born, I felt really isolated because I was freelance writing and taking care of my child. And I'd wake up in the morning, and a lot of times I wouldn't even get out of my pajamas until like 5 o'clock because I'd just hit the ground running. And I'd be between him at the computer, and drinking became my daily reward. So it became a daily thing, you know. And it started out with wine, just with drinking wine. And then I had a cousin who was working on his doctoral dissertation, and he was a very big party buddy of mine. I loved drinking with him. And he would come over, and he never finished his dissertation either because of drinking,
Right.
and a lot of it was he was, come on over, and he wasn't a wine drinker. And I wasn't a bourbon drinker, so we settled on vodka. So we started drinking vodka martinis together and had our little martini hour.
It just feels
And
so cool, right? You're
yeah,
just edgy and cool. And
yeah,
I feel it coming off of you, the same thing that I had, the same thing that I think a lot of moms like us who had careers and thought of themselves a certain way and thought that their job or I mean I thought of myself as edgy and cool and I thought being a mom that just goes to Target every day really lessens that cool factor. So I'm making myself sound like more of an asshole than I was, but there was just this thing in me that was like, I'm kind of a rebel. I'm not just a mom, and I don't like it when people call me like Elby's mom. Like I'm a person who had a whole
yeah,
life before this, and I would do a lot to try to give myself that feeling of like, and drinking was part of it, I think.
yeah, I agree. I actually felt like becoming a mother made me uncool. Like I mean, like I don't know where that came from, really, you know. Maybe, you know what? I think perhaps it had to do with my mother-in-law, who was another great drinking buddy of mine. And she was an artist, and she had 4 kids, and I married her youngest. And she was just, I don't know, certain things that she would say were just kind of like, I mean, she's big drinker, big smoker, and was not Mother of the Year. But she made comments too to the effect like, "Oh, you don't want that to become you," or I don't know. Like I had so much of my persona wrapped up in what I did, not who I was.
Yeah, same.
And yeah, and my model of motherhood, you know, was my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom and had kind of drilled it in, both of my parents drilled it into me that basically I was a shitty mom if I didn't raise my own kids. Like if I, went out and worked and put them in daycare somewhere, nobody's going to love them like you love them. Nobody's going to take care of them, which, I felt was true too. But, um, and I just saw this like super religious, rigid, mom that I grew up with that was so uncool to me. And then, cool dad. Whereas, like, I didn't want to be that. I still wanted to be cool. Like, when I was in journalism school, I knew I always wanted to be a mother. like, but I wanted to have like, I have two kids, but at that point I was like, I just want to have one kid. I want to have that experience. I've always been an experience girl, like just live and experience and have as many experiences as I can and dive in and feel it and be it. And so I figured, once was enough, but I was going to be a journalist. I wanted to cover wars. I wanted to be like a war correspondent. And I had like this idea, like I was gonna have my baby on in a backpack, like trucking through like fields where guns are going off. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
I mean, the thing that's even more ridiculous is that all I wanted was to be the kind of mom like that my parents were, where you bring the baby to like a party. Like my parents were kind of hippy dippy, a lot of friends, a lot of like going to other people's houses a lot. And I was like, I want to be the mom that just doesn't let my life stop, that brings my baby and then she sleeps on the coats in the guest room. But then I found out that my baby wouldn't nap anywhere but her crib. And so, like, that was shattered. And I was like, oh, so now I have to be the mom that is home and regimented and scheduled. And but it is funny that, I mean, yours is a way more bigger example of that, but it never works out.
No,
These babies are
no,
not that flexible,
no, no. I thought I was still going to slam dance at punk clubs with my baby on my back.
right? Right?
Yeah.
So you're going to just have a cool baby.
Yeah, I'm going to show them how to live. And then you become a mother and you're like, oh,
You're like, no,
you know,
okay, yeah, I guess I am gonna
and
just go to Target, and it really is gonna become
yeah,
the biggest part of my day.
and I'm sitting in my pajamas at 5 o'clock and I look like shit. Can I swear?
Of course, yeah, I've already
Okay,
done it.
okay, okay. I was like, it just kind of like automatically rolls off, but
Swear
I
as
can make
much
a
as you want.
conscientious effort to not do it. So
Please
it
don't
just
make that
takes
effort.
it. Okay, it's just kind of cathartic, don't you find?
Oh my God, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. That's the good thing about podcasting though, is you can do what you want. We're not
yeah.
on TV, so we don't have those rules. So, okay, so you have your friend coming over who's supposed to be working on his dissertation, and
Hmm.
you guys are drinking. And at this point, you still have one kid?
I still have one kid. Yeah, I have
Okay.
8 years between my two.
Okay.
Took me
Okay.
8 years to be like, oh, yeah.
So during that point, were you like, uh, did you feel guilty about your drinking?
Yeah, yeah. I started feeling really uncomfortable with the amount that I was drinking, and waking up hungover every day
Yeah.
was happening. And you know, feeling terrible every morning and having a baby to take care of. It's not really fun. I mean, it's just, ugh. And so I started feeling like really uncomfortable about the amount I was drinking. And my husband at the time was coming home to a drunk wife every night. And he was very tolerant because he grew up in an alcoholic family. His mom was one of my favorite drinking buddies. As I said, she drank a ton. His father died of alcoholism when he was like 20 years old. So I never even met him. And he was a creative too. He was a creative director and an ad writer at Leo Burnett and big agency in Chicago. Um, so um,
Did he ever call you on your drinking?
yeah. So I think largely because he was upset that my cousin Mike was over every night. And so he was coming home to him and me plowed. And after months of that, he's like, this has to stop. You know, you got to knock this off. I can't take it anymore. And it had to be pretty bad for him to say something because he was and is the type of person who just hates confrontation and avoids it at all costs. So that coupled with the fact that I was already really uncomfortable with the amount and the frequency that I was drinking, I was like, I got to do something. And I don't know. I woke up with a like a really wicked hangover after that, and just kind of like shaking inside, and knew I needed to stop. And I called my dad, and I was like, um, I got to do something because I can't keep going like I am. And I had tried, curtailing things and couldn't on my own. And so I was like, I'm thinking I'll go to a meeting. Will you go with me? And he said, yeah. So my dad and I went to my first recovery meeting together. And after that, and it was like what they do when they, first step you and they go around and tell all their horror stories. And a lot of them are pretty bad. So my dad's just like, all right, from now on, you're on your own.
Oh man.
Yeah, you got me in the door, but then he was like, ciao. So, so I kept going for 3 months, and then
Did you get a sponsor or
decided,
did you just like go?
yeah, one attached herself to me.
They do
Yeah,
they do that sometimes.
yeah. That's how I got yeah, both of my first
Uh-huh.
sponsors,
Uh-huh.
because this had lasted 3 months. And then I was like, oh, I got this under control now. I haven't had a drink in 3 months, and I've broken the cycle. And it's just, I was habituated to this, and now I'm not anymore. I broke the cycle. And yeah. And we had my mother-in-law had a vacation cottage. In Michigan. So we went up to, go to the beach, and I hadn't really made the decision to start drinking. I mean, I was kind of like edging towards that. But anyway, she's out there drinking martinis. My husband's out there drinking martinis, and I'm like, screw this. Pour me one too. And I drank for 8 more years after that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And it escalated like it always does. So it went from, so by the time I quit this last time, the second time, um, I was drinking like 2 to 3 really stiff martinis to get myself going, and then a bottle of wine, bottle and a half, whatever, every night. Maybe I took one night off a week.
Wow, that's hard.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, it was a
definitely
lot.
toward the end, I drank every single night too. I didn't have the tolerance to drink much more because I was also having a Xanax. So you have your
Mm,
Xanax and then it just makes you tired very quickly. So I couldn't get that. But by the end, no night off. I remember the notion. I remember realizing to myself, like, I never take a night off. I can't. Because if I was like, I'm going to take one night off, it didn't matter. Even if I had a cold, even if I was I'd be like, well, maybe alcohol will help, kill the germs or whatever. I would convince myself,
yeah.
like, I'm just going to have one. And yeah.
Yeah. No, that one night off, it wasn't like a planned night or anything like that. It was like I had just gotten my like consumed a lot of alcohol at that point, where my body was just like, where I didn't feel like it because it was just like, ugh. And then the next day it was like, bam, back at it.
Now, when you went back to drinking, was your husband annoyed or was he like happy to have his drinking buddy back and just like keep it tamer?
Yeah. The second, yeah. Yeah, he was like kind of like, okay, you're okay now, because that whole, oh, you're sick when you stop drinking, but you're fine if you continue to drink, and you can kind of like make it all look good. And yeah, I think he liked me drinking to a certain degree. He didn't like it when I kept going, and, you know. got blackout drunk or, was pulling yoga moves and falling in garbage bins at parties. Because that was embarrassing to him. But, as long as I was the life of the party and, all sparkly and, he was great with that. It was just, yeah,
So during the time that you were sober, that you were drinking again for the 8 years, is that when you had your second kid?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
And
then it's starting to escalate. You've got a new baby.
well, I'll tell you, and this was like a really hard truth that I came to. I mean, I knew it in the back of my head, you know. Um, so one of the reasons I had my second one was because I knew it would make me stop drinking. When I was pregnant, it I didn't want to drink. It, just the thought of it made me sick. So um, it's not, there are plenty of women who drink throughout their pregnancies, and I can't claim any moral high ground for that decision. It just went against me. Just like, walking through the grocery store down the roasted chicken aisle was like, whoa, it was like that. So,
I had the exact experience, and I think a lot of women I've talked to have too. Some women's chemistry is just like, yeah, I didn't drink when I was pregnant at all with my twins. With my first one, I drank because I was told I could back then. Like I could have 2 glasses of wine a week, and I
mhm.
had no problem sticking to that. I just didn't have the craving.
Yeah, yeah, me
And
either.
with the twins, when I was pregnant with the second pregnancy, it was disgusting to me. Like I always felt on the verge of feeling a little sick anyway. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And, it wasn't the only reason, but it was a factor. Because complete strangers, cab drivers, whatever, would tell me, you can't just have one child. That's not right. They need a sibling. And, just the question, oh, do you just have one? I mean, like, I was, and then, my Max, my oldest, did want to, I started like, because like I said, I always just wanted to have one. And then I started asking my friends who were only children if they liked it or not. And they said that they did until they got older and their parents started getting older. And then they were left all alone with, an old parent to have to deal with. And, then when they die, anyway. So I was just like, oh, I need to have another one. But the not drinking thing was, part of that decision. And when I owned up to that truth, I bawled my eyes out. I was like, oh my God, and I'm so thrilled that I have Van, who is just about to turn 25. And yeah, I mean, what a blessing he is. And I just adore him. But yeah, that's that's where that
but
idea came from.
so then did you feel when you had your second, like, oh, I've got to stay home again? I
Mhm.
want to like interject too that there's something about it's I don't know if it's embarrassing, but there's something about I think we both had the privilege. There was a part of me that always wished that I didn't have the option to stay home. Not that we were so well off financially, but my husband was like, I think somebody should stay home with a baby
Yeah.
when they're really young. And like you were saying earlier, there was a part of me that was like, well, yeah, because anxiety wise, I would feel bad putting my baby in daycare. But also, I had the privilege of being able to make that decision. And
Mhm.
part of me wonders, I mean, there's no sense in wondering, but if I just had to, if it wasn't a thing that I could think about and decide, you know, if I could have just, if I had to put my kid in daycare and continue working, if things would have been different. Although just knowing how I drink, probably not.
Yeah.
Because I opted to state to be like, okay. then I'll stay home. And a lot, I think I was really bored and kind of unfulfilled that for,
Hmm.
and even if it's just for a few months, there was just that feeling that we talked about earlier of my identity being taken away. So I wonder if when you
Yeah.
had the second one, if you felt like, because now you have an 8-year-old, which is easy streets,
Right.
right? And now
Yeah.
you're going to start
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. Yep. And so so when I had Max, I was living in Chicago. Yeah, it wasn't just me getting giving myself the message that, oh, now I'm dull and boring and nobody wants to talk. I remember going to parties where I wasn't writing like I used to, and I had this infant to take care of, and I wasn't like, oh yeah, I just did this cover story for the Chicago Reader and blah 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 blah, you know, like people didn't want to talk to me anymore. Like I was just kind of like, yeah. So I was getting some of that, it's just like, yeah, she's just a little woman at home with the baby and I hated it, I
I told,
hated,
yeah, I told this story in my book about how I had been a writer for Family Feud. I was like a question writer, and a bunch of the writers when I worked there, and it's that show's gone through a lot of incarnations. So please don't try to figure out, not you, but listeners, who it was, but it doesn't matter. But I remember very well they had gotten either a writer had quit, but it was like they'd had one woman who was a mom, and they all would make fun of her because all her questions had to do like name something in a baby's nursery or
mm,
name a reason a baby might be crying. And they were like, she was like the worst. She had just a one-track mom mind, And I was like, oh yeah, I would never be like that. Well, I was like, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so when I had my second son, I had moved to the suburbs because we moved to the suburbs when Max became school age. And we lived in a suburb called Libertyville. Um, that is a lovely, lovely town, kind of Stepfordy. There are a lot of, I got in this play group with a bunch of women who had kids Max's age, who were stay-at-home moms, and we planned outings and, you know, so I was in good company with I had friends um that were staying at home with their kids. So when I had Van, I was already in suburbia and doing the stay-at-home mom thing with other moms. And oh my God, the conversations were like mind-numbing, you know. The longer burger parties and the candle parties and the cabbie parties and the pampered chef
Peppered
parties
chef,
and
yes. I bought a can. I got pressured hard pressured into buying a can opener that leaves your the top without an edge, without a sharp
yeah,
edge.
yeah. I have
Like,
to
all
say,
right.
those baking stones are kick ass. Like I still use it. It's like the best one. And the garlic press.
Yeah. Everyone
Yeah,
always
they're
says
still,
like
yeah.
Pampered Chef, it is an MLM, but you get some good shit from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, all the conversations were about children. It's not like I was connecting with anybody on a personal, woman to woman level. It was all, I'm doing this for my kid and doing that for my kid, and I'm the best mom. And it was kind of like it was competitive that way,
Yeah.
like we kind of were talking about before, where it's just like, yeah, there's a lot of judgment and pressure in the mommy circle, and how good of a job you're doing, and and everybody's talking about how gifted their kids are, and what sports programs, and everybody's like running around like chickens with their heads cut off to hockey and music lessons, and just I remember. one time, I think I had Max in karate and hockey, and I forget what else at the time. There's probably something else too. And we picked up my husband from the airport and just went out to dinner one night and blew off all of this stuff that he was supposed to be doing that day. And I just remember him sitting in the booth at the restaurant and just, it feels so good to be doing nothing. It was just all this like psycho competition, like how busy and how, you know, like if your kid was in the gifted program and getting, taking Kumon so they could be math whizzes and outdo your kid. And oh, yeah, we're in hockey lessons, but now he's got a private trainer. And oh my God, and it was so gross to me. Like, and I was like, how the hell did I wind up in this, doing this, being a part of it? And, you know, so once I got sober and I started going to recovery meetings and started hearing people actually be real and talk about what was going on with them, it was such a huge relief. I was like, kind of like Max in the booth, like, oh,
But what was
real
that
people.
moment? What happened? What was your bottom? What made you decide after 8 years? Like, well, because you said you were back out there for 8 years. What made you
Yeah.
decide, like, I'm done?
So it was escalating and escalating and escalating, and I did a fair amount of blacking out. And whenever I planned to do controlled drinking, it never happened. I never had controlled drinking. It's like, it put one drink in me and I was off to the races. So, um, I was becoming more and more uncomfortable and the hangovers were wicked. And it was right around the holidays. My sobriety date is December 27th. And it was right around the holidays, and I had a lot of Christmas parties. And one weekend in particular, back to back, heavy drinking with heavy partier friends. And I woke up on a Sunday and was like, I can't do it anymore. Just can't. It was just, I knew I was killing myself. I'm like 110 pounds. You're a small woman too. And I could drink a 300-pound guy under the table. I could hold my booze too, just like my dad. you know? And I had enough. I just had enough. And I was like, so the other thing too is this was like 3 months after my mother-in-law died and my grandmother died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the end of that summer in 2002, um, my grandmother was 94. I watched her basically go from old age, and she and I were very close. And I was very close with my mother-in-law too. They died a week and a half apart from each other, and my mother-in-law from lung cancer. And um, I felt my mortality acutely for the first time, and I was like, I am pissing my life away. I'm drunk every single night. I'm numbing out. I feel like crap every morning. I'm vowing to myself every morning I'm not going to drink. And then, by like 2 o'clock, I was feeling pretty good and coming up with the dinner plan and what kind of wine was I going to have with dinner and, whole thing over and over again, just the merry-go-round that I just could not get off. And I had it, and I tried controlled drinking. Like I said, it never worked out. Um, and it wasn't fun for me because I would when I went out to dinner with friends who were not alcoholics, I matched my drinks with theirs and I kind of like watched, okay, like I'll drink my wine the way they drink theirs. So I'd have like one glass and you know And by the time dinner was over with, because we'd had maybe one martini and one glass of wine, and I'm like, you want to have, let's have a bottle. Oh no, that's too much, and I'd go home and finish off the job.
Yeah.
So, so, um, I just, I knew right away too. It's like I couldn't do it, and it wasn't fun for me. It was torture. Controlled drinking was torture, you know.
The
Anyway,
worst.
so yeah.
It
So,
just makes you crave more. It makes you drink more. The more you try to control
yeah.
it, the more you end up drinking more than you probably would have if you were just. But toward
Yeah.
the end of my drinking, I hated the controlled drinking so much that I was like, what I'm going to do, my new plan is going to be I'm just not going to try to control my drinking, but I'm going to make sure that I'm only drinking like at home, like after the kids are in bed. And then when that went out the window, then it was like, okay, now
Yeah,
I
my
know.
rule was 5 o'clock. I didn't drink before 5. And I got that from my mother-in-law. She had that rule for herself too. But boy, at 5 o'clock, Pavlov's dog, boom.
Yeah. Yeah. So you knew where to
Yeah,
go when you decided
I
I'm
knew
done
where to
again.
go. Yeah. Yeah. So I started going to meetings when I would otherwise be drinking. So I was going to like meetings at like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock to just give myself that so I wasn't like getting that martini shaker out.
And was it different? Did you feel different like the first time, which I'm with you because I had a first time as well that only lasted like 6 weeks, but then I got pregnant and didn't drink for my pregnancy. So it was like basically a year where I felt like, oh yeah, okay, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm gonna try drinking again. But the second time I got sober, I was like, I have to be done. Like this, I have to be done. Did you have that feeling?
Yeah. Although, like I said, that first year, I kept on like, maybe I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not that bad. They're way worse than me, you know. Um, but so I wound up creating a little laundry list for myself. Like, normal drinkers don't get pregnant to stop drinking. That was number one. Um,
I'm not seeing it
when
as bad as you're. It's funny because you're like, that's the hard truth. And I'm like, that makes kind of makes sense to me.
I know I'm not the only one.
No, by a
But you
long
know what?
shot.
It was just like, I was so judgmental. I mean, I was caught up in that whole mommy thing,
Yeah.
you know, like being like, mother of the year. I'm going to be, like it was just like this weird competitive thing that I was in this like play group, mommy group, and just the people in little Libertyville, Illinois, in your little Midwest town, and yeah,
So I'm dying to know
and
though. Okay, so you hit a point though where you do your laundry list, which is also known in recovery circles as your first step. You take a
mhm,
look at what your drinking was really like and not how we try to make it prettier in our minds of like,
yeah,
I was only doing this, I was only doing that, I wasn't hurting anybody. And then you see it in black and white and you're like, oh, I guess it wasn't that great. But then I want to know, so then and then you're journaling.
yeah.
How do you decide to publish a book from being
Oh
kind
my
of
God.
sensitive and trying to like blend in with the other
Yeah.
moms?
Yeah. So I remember I was at a band concert. That was one of the other activities I had Max in. He played the trumpet for a very short period of time.
Uh-huh.
And he was in the band. And so we're sitting there listening, and I have my purse on my chair, and Van is, I don't know, he's like 2, because when I got sober the last time, Max was 10, Van was 2. So he's like, playing in my purse. And they've got those little booklets that they give you in recovery meetings of, the meeting list. And in the back, everybody writes their phone number so that, you can call them for help if you need help. And So, so he's like in my purse, and all this stuff is like falling on the floor. And the AA directory, oh, I shouldn't say AA,
That's
the
okay.
recovery directory. I'm
We all know what we're talking
usually
about.
pretty good about, I know,
We're not
but still,
advertising it. We're not telling you to go there. We're just, that's just
yeah,
what you were doing. Yeah. Okay.
that's
So,
just where I went.
yeah.
So the directory's laying on the floor, and I see the woman next to me in the chair, like staring at it, like. And I was like, and I like scooped it up and I was just like, yeah. So I went from that. I'm keeping a journal with the intent that maybe it could become a book at some point, who knows? And I started blogging it. And I figured, if I just help one person, or if just the small amount of people who are actually seeing this blog get something out of it, great. So um, I finished the book and I sent it to my friend Sarah, who was the one who put the fire out of my hair.
Uh-huh.
And and she lived in Minneapolis at the time, and her husband um, had sat on the board of Hazelden, and because he had a friend who had like a really bad addiction, and he sent his friend to Hazelden to get sober, and it worked, and so he wound up like being a board member. So she read my book. She's a journalist too, and was an editor. Um, and So she's like, "Oh, Brenda," she's like, "this is really good. Let me give it to Paul and have him walk it into Hazelden and just see." And I was just like, "Oh, no, no," because I'm thinking I want like this big publishing house and this big. So I'm like shopping it around to agents, and that's a hard thing to do. And just
Very
getting
hard.
rejections. And I mean, it was like very well received. And I had like, people who would like passed it on to their agent boss, and I got real very nice rejections, and like keep going or whatever. But so finally I was just like, yeah, have them show it. And they loved it and published it, and it became a book. And then I was like, oh wow, now people are going to know.
Yeah,
So it was
right?
like, yeah, yeah, because I was kind of okay with it and just being nothing and just being a blog, and being, because it really scared me. And so it's like, as a writer, your dream is to have a book published. So on one hand I'm elated, and on the other hand I'm petrified. So it was like the weirdest thing going on, like, ugh.
Of course.
So it came out, and I wasn't gonna do a book release party or anything. I was just gonna keep mum about it, and if people found out about it, then they found out about it. And so another friend of mine who knew was just like, "Oh no, Brenda, you have to have a book release party." So I was just like, she's like, "And you got to do it like right away. You're gonna, miss this opportunity, and you need to do it. This is a big deal, and you need to have a book release party." So I did. And I wound up having a couple. I had one in the city, and then, one in the suburbs. And I sent out an email to the people I knew, giving them a heads up that this book is coming out. And anyway, I got a lot of emails back from people that, it was very heartening, who were telling me that they too had a problem, and they were worried, they were concerned about their drinking, and wanted to know, how I came to the decision that I needed to quit, and maybe they needed to quit, or they had a parent or a sibling or a spouse who was struggling. I got a lot of um, feedback, like good positive feedback about it. And then book came out, I had my book release party, and I was like, oh God, because I changed the names of all of my friends. If you were my family, and if you knew me, you knew who they were. So that was kind of pointless to change their names. But I changed the names and identifying characteristics of my friends. And just like held on for dear life on that roller coaster. And it was, I lost friends. They knew who they were.
And they were
And
mad.
nobody had an issue with truth or accuracy. It was just, it's harsh. I mean, I was super honest on my thoughts, how I was feeling. Um, I just kind of reported. I was I was a reporter.
You're a
I
journalist.
just, yeah, this happened, that happened, blah 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 blah. Yeah, and yeah, the people in my play group, I'm not in touch with any of them anymore. Dumped.
Excuse me. Well,
Yeah.
when I wrote Sippy Cups Are Not for Chardonnay, I wrote about a play group that it was Mommy and me, and I changed everybody's characteristics and they went berserk.
Hmm.
But
So
yeah. Oh, I
yeah.
totally know. And I had no idea because that was my first book. So I was just writing what happened. I knew enough
Hmm.
to change their names, and a lawyer looked
Yeah.
through it and made me change certain things. But if you were in that Mommy and Me, you knew who I was talking about 100%. The
Right.
woman that I was the most harsh about, I ran into her at a mall like a long time later, and she was totally laughing about it. And I was the worst towards her, and she was like, I thought it was hilarious, but some of the ones that I was not that bad even towards, like shunned, I was shunned.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Oh
No,
well.
yeah. Yeah. But like, so I came to believe that, I was a better friend by being honest and holding up a mirror than being dishonest and pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't.
Let me ask you this, author to author. So that's your real life people. Because when I was blogging, people that I knew, like my internet friends, and when I came out and said that I quit drinking, were really supportive. When when I was on TV, let's just say, because it was reported. They did a New York Times. I got kind of outed by the New York Times. And my point of saying that is when strangers started commenting, I found it, especially at the beginning, like so hurtful and personal. And I'm wondering if you had any backlash, because the book became a really big book. Was that because of a
Hmm.
TV appearance? Did you
I
do
was
the
on the
Today
Today
Show?
Show.
Okay,
Yeah.
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 And back
Yeah.
at that time, it was a big deal to be on the Today
Yeah.
Show.
Yes.
Everybody knew about you when you were on the Today
Yeah.
Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then did you hear any backlash? Was that tough?
Yeah. As you know, it's just the trolls, the comments that pop up,
Shouldn't have ever
you
had
know.
kids. If you hate being a mom so much, if you're saying having kids makes you drink, you should never have had this woman should have her kids taken away. I mean, just right.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the judgment and a lot of I found I got a lot of angry feedback from people who were related to alcoholics and were really angry with them. And, oh, now you're just hiding out in meetings and you're not participating in life. And poor me. Well, what about your poor family? And blah, blah. Yeah.
And the whole thing that's so
And it
ridiculous is
wasn't
like,
like,
you're sober now. That's the whole thing. Like, it's not like
yeah,
you wrote a book about, like, I am currently a really bad alcoholic. And you're like, I made a decision to quit drinking, which hopefully will help a lot of people and I'm putting myself out there. And now you're mad at me for quitting.
yeah,
Like, what part of I
yeah.
don't do that anymore did you not understand by reading the book?
I think, it felt to me like a lot of the angry feedback that I was getting from people who didn't consider themselves alcoholics and were somehow hitched to somebody who was an alcoholic and had to deal with it, wanted, I don't know, I guess they wanted my life to really go down the tubes and to be punished and to have horrible things happen to me and that didn't happen, like my life didn't fall apart. I didn't come in when my life was in the toilet. And I think, there's like this wrath of God or something that we all should experience for being alcoholic, or that's how it felt to me at the time. And I had all these positive, great comments, like women and men, seeing themselves and making the decision. I mean, that was kind of my whole point is like, don't let your life go down the drain. You can do something. Like if you recognize yourself in my story, you don't, you can do something and it's your life gets better. Like it really, really does. I thought that my life would be dull and boring, and it wasn't that at all. It was like if there was more life in it than ever, because I was awake, I was aware, I was present, I was feeling, and that wasn't always comfortable, but yeah.
I mean, I
So,
totally agree. When I wrote Drunkish, I forced myself to include all the everything I felt as a drinker, all the things that the embarrassing, everything. I just was like, I'm gonna put it all out there because I don't know for a fact that everybody's gonna relate but if you relate, you're gonna relate harder if I tell you the absolute truth. And
right.
if you're not going to relate, you're not going to relate. So, like, there's nothing I can do about that. But that's how you touch people by telling the truth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how I'd always
Like,
been touched in meetings. When I heard people say things that I was like, that whole like killing me softly, that's what I wanted. I want people to hear the ugliness of my truth and go, oh my gosh, no one's ever said that no one's ever admitted to that. And now that makes me feel better.
yeah. Yeah. And I knew everything when I was going through my book, editing it, that I wanted to take out because it made me cringe. That was the gold.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you wrote that book. And any regrets? Because you were kind of a pioneer. I
Thank
was a,
you.
you were. I mean, that was a book that was held up as like we women, moms, it says it right in the title, Diary of a Drunk Housewife, of an Alcoholic Housewife. That wasn't a thing that people were doing. It's
No,
much more common now, I think. The quit lit, there's a lot of quit lit, there's a lot of women writing that, but you took a chance. You put yourself out there, and I really want to commend you for that.
thank you. Yeah, I just, like I said, I went looking for that book. And then, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to get into anything like real spiritual, but it was just like it didn't come from me. I got a push, like write that book, and I did.
That's really
And
beautiful.
yeah, and it you know what? It makes me like there's a lot of good that I hope that I think has come out of my life that, has made the world hopefully a better place and for certain people and whatever. But that actually, like, I can go to my grave being like, I did good. I did some good. I did
Yeah.
something that mattered because I know it's helped a lot of people and it's still out there helping people. And it's in its second edition now and it's been out there a while. And yeah, and it's, I still hear from people. And it just, that is it makes me feel, like my life has mattered.
Oh, well, what are you doing now? Tell us where we can find you.
So I am living in Taos, New Mexico, in an earth ship and loving it. And I am writing. I'm editing my second book and hopefully going to shop it very soon. It's been very difficult to end, but I think I finally found a good ending for it. And so I put the ending on, and now I'm going through it one more time from beginning to end and tightening things up. And yeah, it's been like, the first one came out in 2011, and here we are in 25. So it's been 14 years. So
That's
yeah,
okay.
it's this one's about my divorce. And again, coming out of that, like this stuff can take you down or you can grow from it. And I wouldn't want to repeat it. Hell no. And it's called Thank You, Ashley Madison.
Oh, that tells
So
us all we need to know, I think. I like that though. I love
yeah,
that title.
yeah, yeah.
That's catchy.
So, like for the last 5 years of my 21-year marriage, my ex was on Ashley Madison. And when I was on the Today Show, I thought it was like really weird that he didn't want to be on the Today Show with me because I thought he would have been all over it. But he was on Ashley Madison and he would have been noticed. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So the divorce started. I got divorced 2 years after the book came out.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like maybe just being sober, maybe it helped you be more present and know what was really going on. Is there something to that?
Uh, you know, I knew something, I was really unhappy. Um, I became a different person when I got sober, you know. When I married him, we were both hard partying journalists. And, we talked about the whole cool thing and the snarky thing and so smart and cool. And once I got sober, I just I walked away from that whole cynical piece. And, when I got married, I was emotionally unavailable, just like he was emotionally unavailable.
Hmm.
And I thought that was good. Like neither of us would have to be vulnerable. We could just, we could do life together. We could laugh together. We could drink together and not have to ever go very deep. And then once I got sober and realized that was nothing, like basically I was like living with a bar buddy, you know? And we never had like any real conversations or connections or, and I wanted that to happen. And he wasn't there. And so I changed a lot on him, you know? And then anyway, my dad died of cancer. And the year that his last year, I spent a lot of time with him, and I would come home like depressed and, had my crises of faith multiple times. And it's just, anyway, I wasn't paying enough attention to him. So apparently, according to him, that's when he started that up, the Ashley
So,
Madison
of
thing.
course, it was your fault. Your
You
fault that I was
know,
doing some super sneaky,
yeah.
dishonest behavior. That's on you.
Well, you know what? He didn't really go there, but I kind of, being I- you know, being in recovery and, working 12 steps, I was always looking for my character defects and what I was doing wrong. So I spent a lot of time beating myself up and taking the blame that I had no right to take the blame for until I finally had that rude awakening was like, hey, he had many ways to go. he did that, you know? I mean, like, no, that's not on me. But
No.
I kind of personally went there, like, you know, which is kind of egotistical and arrogant to be like, oh, well, if I hadn't done this, he wouldn't have done that. It's like, oh no, no. He's responsible for his actions. I'm responsible for my actions, and that, you know.
Well, I have a feeling that this book is going to be especially great because you're coming at it from a sober standpoint. So it's not going to come across as just victim. It's just like, this
Oh
is what was
no.
done to me. And that's one of the beautiful things I think about, being active in recovery and being able to look at yourself and know like what's
Hmm.
my part, but then also tell a good story. So I
Yeah.
can't wait. Get on it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm close to putting it out there, so hopefully hopefully I'll have some good news for you soon.
Okay. So people can go to your website, which I'll put in to keep up with what's going on, which is, I think it's basically just brendawilhelmson.com.
Yep.
And you'll see
Yep.
the name and the title of this episode. And are you on Instagram? You are, right?
I hardly ever do
Oh.
anything on Instagram. I'm mainly on Facebook.
Okay. Yeah. Kind of same. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
do you take friend requests from randos? Should I send
I
people to your
do.
Facebook?
I
Okay.
do.
Okay, go check out her
If
Facebook.
if I can make sure that like you're a real person and not like some, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
some fake thing that, you know, somebody in some other country is putting together to like, you know.
Right,
Yeah, if you're a
right.
real person, I will friend you.
Okay. Well, it's been so lovely talking to you. Thank you for your openness, and it was downright inspiring. And I hope to talk to you soon.
I hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Stephanie. Yeah.
Bye.